Welcome everyone to the Embracing Brokenness video and audio podcast. I'm Steve, and this week we're going to talk Disney. That's right, Disney. For all of us who were kids, I think most of us were at one point or another, we've experienced something related to Disney, whether it was a visit to Disney World or if you happen to be on the West Coast, Disneyland. We read the books, we saw the movies most likely, and that's the focus of today. I'd like to pick one of those movies and just look at the parallels in our life, in our journey of discovery, and in this case, The Lion King, one of my favorites, Simba's journey toward discovery. And I want to recap for you a little bit of what that looked like in this one scene. Now, let me back up. I mean, most of you, Disney movies are not Christian movies, but they are, and they do reflect life, right? For most of us, most movies do in some way, shape, or form. There's a villain that gets introduced. Somehow or another, that villain gets the upper hand, and then, oh my gosh, the hero comes on the scene and revives it all. Well, Disney's no different. If, in this case, you recall Simba, who was kind of escaped the Pride Land only because of his evil Uncle Scar, who encouraged him to run, Simba, run, after the death of his father through a stampede that Scar set up. So, Scar, the evil one, is a great parallel to the enemy, our enemy, that lives today to destroy us. Mufasa, Simba's father, would be a great symbol of God our Father, and Simba, I think in this case, would be us. He gets the opportunity to have dominion over the earth and its creation as the king of the Pride Land, if you will, but gets chased away by Scar. So he's out there doing his thing, and of course, like many of us, we go out and do our thing before we figure out our identity. And there's one particular scene I love because Rafiki, who we've all gone to love and kind of cherish in his own way, I would probably parallel Rafiki to the Holy Spirit in this case, so keep that in mind. He comes jumping along to see Simba after an encounter with Nala, his sort of growing up friend who, back in the Pride Land, they figured was going to be the next royal couple, right? So in this case, not so much. Simba takes off, has a great time with his buddies Pumbaa and Timon, and he's doing his thing. Hakuna Matata, right? Everything, carefree life, you know what I mean? And, he faces a reality when he re-encounters a relationship with Nala that says, hey, what are you doing? Where are you? We need you. Back in the Pride Land, Scar's taken over. Everything is completely destroyed. And Nala kind of calls Simba up toward his true identity, as does Rafiki. So I love the parallel here, right? So we have this scene that's set when Rafiki comes back in this particular scene, and he encounters Simba in his more mature state, starting to question everything, starting to question it all. And he comes, bounding in, singing a song that nobody really understands. And it's a little annoying to Simba, and he really doesn't remember Rafiki because he was just a little cub at the time. But I'm going to read a little bit of the script here because I think this is such a great parallel to what God's calling us up into. And even Rafiki, the Holy Spirit, just speaking to our heart, right? So let's kind of pick it up right here. Rafiki asks Simba, he says, "Who are you?" Simba replies, "Well, I thought I knew. Now I'm not sure." And I appreciate that, by the way, of Simba, because for most of us, we don't know our true identity through much of our life. And of course, in a crisis at a time like Simba was facing, he's really starting to ask himself that question. So Rafiki says, "Well, I know who you are. Come here, it's a secret," he says. And then he goes on singing a song, and he just kind of annoys Simba a little bit. But Simba says, "All right, enough already." He said, "What's that supposed to mean anyway?" And Rafiki says, "Well, it means you're a baboon and I'm not." So again, just kind of playfully trying to call him into a self-discovery. A little bit like even the Holy Spirit might do at times. Not really, going to approach that all-important question until we're ready to hear it. So I love it. And Simba says, I think you're a little confused. Wrong. I'm not the one who's confused. You don't even know who you are. Of course, Simba's irritated at this point. He says, oh, and I suppose you do. Well, sure I do. You're Mufasa's boy. You knew my father? Correction, I know your father. Well, I hate to tell you this, but he died a long time ago. Nope, wrong again. He's alive, and I'll show him to you. You follow old Rafiki. I know the way. Come on. And so they take off through the jungle. And if you recall the scene, I mean, they're just, Simba's, struggling to keep up. And Rafiki's taken off into the distance, and he's, dodging in vines and roots and trees. And you can imagine just how to picture your journey toward discovery. And it's just filled with all sorts of difficult encounters, right? And then when they get through an opening, and Rafiki parts the brush or the actual reeds, and he says, look, in the water. He said, look down. He said, you'll see your reflection. That's who you are, Rafiki, he says. And Simba, of course, balks at the idea, and Rafiki says, no, look, harder, you see. He lives in you. At which point in time you see the sort of this different reflection come up, and Mufasa's face appears and says, Simba, Father, Simba, you have forgotten me. No, how could I? You have forgotten who you are, and so have forgotten me. Look inside yourself. Simba, you are more than what you have become. You must take your place in the circle of life. Simba says, well, how can I go back? I'm not who I used to be. I love that. Mufasa says, remember who you are, and here's the punchline, folks. You are my son. And I just love that visual, right? You can just see Mufasa, the father, our Father in heaven, who just reaches down into Simba's little world and says, no, remember who you are. You're my son. Same for us, folks. Like, we're God's son. There's so much here for us. We have to grasp the reality of who we are. And yes, we can go sideways and up and down, and we can get ourselves into a lot of different places. But in the end, as many people say at the end of the day, we are children of God. And so I would challenge you to think about that in a little different way. God calls us back to him on so many levels. We lose our way. And in this case, when Simba does make his way back into the Pride Land, God gives him the victory. In this case, Mufasa and Rafiki and his friends, they all come around him, and they help lead him to that discovery of his true self and what he was intended to be and who he was intended to be. He was intended to be the king, the overseer of the Pride Land. We have a definitive purpose in our lives, and it may seem really scrambled right now for you. For me, it was years until I really got a handle on what God had called me to, but I had to discover who I was first. And so much the way Simba had to discover it through going a different path for a lot of his life, there's never a time that is too late for us. We just need to open our eyes and our hearts and our minds to what God has called us into. And that comes through intimacy with him. Simba saw Mufasa's reflection, his own reflection. And then, if you remember, the clouds opened up and Mufasa spoke to him from heaven. This is so good, so good. He just simply said, just remember who you are. You're my son. Remember who you are. You're God's child. Whatever you have encountered in life, right now, just stop and just ask yourself that question. And God will answer it to you. Hopefully it's not in a way that is difficult for you to really grasp and grab hold of. But it is a journey, so it may be something that you have to take some time and discover. But it does require quiet time before the Lord. So here's my challenge to you, I think. I'd like you to think about this. You know, I mean, you may be in a place in your life where there's complacency or even an all-out rebellion going on. And I would call Simba's little, time away with Pumbaa and Timon and his Hakuna Matata as a time in his life when he was rebellious. He just left and he was going to experience the world for what it was. But then he became restless with his true identity. And so for you, you know, it might even be a season of not knowing right now. You just aren't sure. But it just requires a surrender to the truth of who you are and who God has called you up to be. And it's a simple truth. It really is. It's not complicated. I think Mufasa said it. Rafiki said it. Simba understood it. He's in you. He's in you. Just look inside and ask him for that.